what is, let's say in general, religion's view of human nature? People talk the question, are people good or people inherently good, inherently evil? What you're really doing is just asking, people are people. They have human nature. Is human nature something that's good, or is human nature something that is not good? And this leads to the following: is the human drives, emotions, are they good, or are they something that will take you on the path towards the dark side, as they say? So the fact is that you take this idea of concern for self, some aspect of being concerned for self. Okay, is that drive have value, or does that drive have value, or does it not have value? That's the key starting point in the question. In the classic religious, I'm not talking Torah, I'm talking religions. The fact is there's a perception that man is inherently, his drives are bad. You have to find that's, some people say that's your evil inclination or something like that. The basic human drives are bad. And therefore, the whole idea of religion is to try and challenge those drives, put them away, and so forth and so forth. Now, in that regard, there's two approaches. One approach is just to take them on and break them. That's the approach of, let's say, a Catholic. Vows of poverty and vows of celibacy. So we're going to stop there. Other people say, yeah, those are. I say that's the ideal in Catholicism. The other drive is it's a drive, but it's directed so it doesn't make too much of a mess. That's the idea of necessary evil. It's really not good, but you gotta take it so it doesn't cause such harm. So the point is that looks at certain drives. We have these bad drives. What I'm starting from is a different perspective. If I say that there's concern for self, and I'm saying that that's a good drive, but I'm really saying that there's a value in concern for self, and I talked about this last week in terms of Hayecha, Kodim, and stuff like that, then what I'm saying is that there is an aspect of this drive that has some value. Because Baruch Hu gave us this drive because it's supposed to help us, direct us towards the development of ourselves, because there has to be a certain self-concern. So let's not say selfishness, has to be a certain self-concern, because we are given over this responsibility. So the fact is, if you take that approach, then human nature could possibly be positive. You just have to know how to direct it correctly, but in line with human nature. So what I'm saying is that this model, in a certain way, is saying that human drives have value. Human nature can be valuable, can be worthwhile. If that's true, then human nature, what I'm saying is by extending the self and building up this aspect of the self, you're taking that natural feeling of concern for self, and you're saying, something? My definition of self has to be broader. I have to understand that the community is an extension of myself, and what happens in the community affects me, and what happens to me affects the community. I have to have a broader vision of who I am, of what really is what I'm looking for in terms of that self-benefit. Okay, so therefore there's a development that way, but it starts with a perception that these values have value. That, I should say, these drives have value. This idea, actually, I've seen different viewpoints on this. The point is that within Torah there are different viewpoints on how you look at human nature. There's an article by Professor Lawrence Kaplan at McGill University. He's also a Rav. He actually is the one who translated Isha Halacha, the halachic man, into English, and he did that under the haskama of the Rav, Rabbi Soloveitchik. So the point is, so obviously he has a background, he's a Muslim, whatever. He actually wrote an article comparing the Chazon Ish and Rav Moshe Feinstein. And there's in the article he points out that he feels that there's an argument between them about human nature, specifically about this issue. He says the Chazon Ish really does not feel human nature is good. He feels that if that and it's a certain definition, because human nature is where we'll feel a certain level of happiness. So the Chazon Ish really believes on a certain level that Judaism, the Torah, does not fulfill human nature. Therefore, a person will never really feel totally humanly comfortable in a Torah lifestyle. It will always be an aspect of a conflict, because his normal drives the Torah has to challenge his normal drives. He just can't let it flow. Okay, and therefore he believes that human nature is. I mean, the Rabbi Kaplan, I'm not sure if he's overextending this in the Chazon Ish. I don't know. I think he might be reading the Chazon Ish a little bit to the extreme, but the point is he argues that the Chazon Ish to help that Torah is against human nature. Okay, and therefore Torah is fighting all the time with human nature. But he says Rav Moshe, and he also talks about this in terms of the Rav. They talk in terms of human nature being something that Torah directs human nature, but in the end, following a Torah lifestyle will also be in line with human nature. You as a human being will feel human and feel good about being human. In fact, in the end, the lifestyle will be one that is somewhat joyful. Now, this actually is defended by or presented in terms of Rav Moshe, that there's a classic line that people like to say, "Schwer zu sein a Yid." It's difficult to be a Jew, right? It's hard to be a Jew. Schwer zu sein a Yid. Rav Moshe hated that line, and I've heard this from numerous people. If Moshe heard that line, he got very upset. It's great to be a Jew. You shouldn't have that idea of Schwer zu sein a Yid. It should be, hey, it's fine. Now, interesting, this has a certain aspect of how you look at personalities in terms of people who you would consider to be religious models. It's interesting because there was actually a machlokus about Rav Moshe between the Tendler family and art school. A year after Moshe passed away, art school came up with a biography, and I actually organized a thing on a shir on the youre of Rav Moshe's passing, and his grandson at the time, Mordechai Tendler, who talking about the situation with Mordechai Tendler, but Mordechai Tendler spoke, and one of the opening lines he said, I just bought this book by art school about my grandfather. Read it to my kids. It's a great book, nothing to do with my grandfather, you know. And the fact is, if you look, there's an English translation of Rav Moshe's Tshuvos, specifically on medical ethics. It was supposed to be the first volume of Rav Moshe's Tshuvos, and it was done by Rav Moshe Tendler, Rav Moshe's son-in-law. And in it, there's another biography of Rav Moshe, a very different biography of Rav Moshe. And the portrayal in the book is this, I forget the exact line in the book, but there's a line that sort of says something about Rav Moshe, almost like he was really a nice old man. He didn't be the gadol hador, but just a nice guy. He would have his he would play with his kids on his lap. There's a story in the book how every night when he was younger, he used to go for walks with his wife. He used to go to a soda fountain and have a soda together. You know, I always said that I don't know if there was hashgacha on the place that soda, but guess what? No one questioned you could have soda in that soda. But the fact is that but it was a very different perspective. It was the perspective of Rav Moshe was very much, he was human. He was human in an extension like that. So the truth is that the way I'm presenting this, a little bit of tension. There's certain people who want the idea that religion, and I'm not going to say it isn't, because you have the other side, the Chazon Ish, according to the Rabbi Kaplan or Professor Kaplan. But the point is, there is people who expect from a religious person a sternness, a certain like almost not comfortable in his skin and so forth, and therefore there's that religious perspective of of selfless, and if you want it, don't do it, right? But the point is that there is a lot in Torah which seems to say that there's some point to these drives, starting with the strive for self-concern that we were talking about. That there's an aspect of self-concern, and then it extends out. But as it extends out and takes in humanity, it's a very different perspective. The human aspect of yourself continues to extend. Now, the truth is, if I can just add to this, one thing that I do think, and this is something that I saw a little bit in the Chazon Ish, and I could see Professor Kaplan's point is that the Chazon Ish, I think, defines or the definition of human nature is too confined. There's also the aspect of human nature to care for others. Being friendly is an aspect of human nature. Human nature is not just the drives of taiva and kaas and desire and anger. There's also human nature as an aspect of chesed and ava and caring, and these are also parts of human nature. It's all comes together. But the point is that I'm saying you take all the aspects of human nature and look at that way, and then now we can extend it up. But it creates much more of a dynamic relationship with myself and community. I'm sort of working with the community, but it's not a tension that there's me, a giver, and you're the receiver. But it's like we're together and we're sort of sharing human experience. It almost sounds New Age. I'm not trying to be New Age. I'm trying to give a perspective that gives a model that allows for some further development in terms of that. Now, there's still tensions. There's still bechira and stuff like that. But it's an aspect of knowing how to develop.
Yeah. It seems to me when you look at the animal kingdom that the drives of the animal kingdom are directed towards survival, to continuation of the species
right.
and survival, and that's where all the orientation is. That there's an element of that in humanity.
Yes.
It shouldn't be surprising, because the species should continue.
Right, and the fact is that, but at that point in time,
when you look at the animal kingdom, it doesn't appear that the animal kingdom has the ability to make choices. The animal kingdom generally says, this is what I do to survive, so I do it. This is what I do.
Right.
If I don't do it, then I won't survive and breed. Whereas sometimes humanity can make a decision to do something that is not an individual's personal best interest at that moment for a higher good. Right? And I think, isn't that the nature of free will, to be able to balance those two issues, my own comfortable shoes versus...
Yeah, I think there's an aspect that... See,
it doesn't make the drive for survival evil.
No, you're right, but it's a balance.
It's a neutral kind of thing.
There are times where, to be honest, there are times where the drive to help others can be just as much a taiva, a drive, as as any other drive. There is the thing with the human being is the animal kingdom is created to survive. That's what they're created to do, to survive. We're not just created to survive, we're created to grow. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, and therefore there's a balance in between the past and the future and where we're going in civilization, and to go to a different plane and so forth. I think that there are even aspects of decisions. There's an interesting Freudian thought that Freud, in his last book, basically states that a lot of people didn't quite understand what the Eros drive was. Basically, he said that there are two basic drives in human beings. One is the Eros drive, which most people understand to be the drive for sex. But he said that really what it is a drive to connect. It's almost like the way the mystics understood it about joining together and so forth and so forth. that happens to be tied to sexuality. There's an aspect of sex being connected with love and being connected to to an aspect of connecting. Um, he said the other drive was what he called was basically a drive of extermination, of a drive of death, and that really tells you in a certain way there's a drive for us not to have survival. But the two things he's finding is he's saying the human being, the survival of the species or the survival of society, and we want to connect to the true connection we have as human beings. And then there's this idea of connecting with, or this idea of even making choices that are destructive. And we're able to do that as well. So when you start getting involved...
He's very Viennese.
Yes, yes. But the fact is when you get involved in these things, you have to see that there are many different drives, and you have to figure out a balance. And that's really ultimately where Torah comes into it. And that balance is the fact that it's growth-oriented, which means that in terms of the movement and development, if the parts don't work on themselves, you're never going to have a real functioning collective, right? On the other hand, if you're only worried about yourself, you're not going to have a future. There was someone who told me, and I think I mentioned this to someone today about India, but the fact is that someone told me that 20 years ago, whenever aid was offered to India, they would only take it in the form of assistance with education. India believes in education, and they argue for education. Now the truth is that forsake the short-term goal for a long-term goal. But now people are saying India is really reaping the benefits of that because their society is doing much better. They're actually coming out of the third world country. They're actually doing much better because there was a focus on development. Now that's the kind of balance you have. The fact is that that's a balance we have with any type of growth or any type of developmental idea.
But that means many people might have died of starvation during that time.
That's true,
in order to foster education.
And that's the issue. But the point is that that's why I would not say that India necessarily acted correctly, because I don't know the Heshbonus and stuff like that. Because, and I don't know the Heshbonus. I'm not trying to say that. But the point is the human being is not just about survival. The human being is about the fact that we want to grow. We want to go further. Anyways, but that's part of it. But the question I'm trying to develop here is an aspect of this idea that there's an extension of the human being, and not everything in our life is necessarily an aspect that we have to have a fight. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. That what we're moving towards is this idea that. Now, and I'm not saying there's no tension. There's obviously still going to be a tension. There's still a place of bechira in terms of my personal needs and my communal needs. And I want to help that person out, but I also have my own responsibility. I have responsibility for my family. I want to help that poor person over there. There's all cheshbonos we have to do, and we're not so clear of how to balance out everything. And it's not so simple. It's still very complex. But the fact is, as what I've tried to say for my model, it's a model that works with a little bit more of a human feeling. Okay? Now, with that human feeling, you have a little bit more of responsibility, a little bit more of a consciousness. It's more of a collective. It's not me and the other. Too much of our development, I think, so much in our world today, is so much of me and the other, right? Rather than thinking much more in a collective sense that, hey, we're all working towards a similar goal, moving somewhere, okay, and figuring how to get there. Okay, and that may be more complex than a simplistic model. Like I've argued for a long time, for example, that community is not just, let's say building a school, and you want to create a school with achdus, of unity, right? So we put everyone in one big happy school. I don't think that's the correct attitude. I think you should have a bunch of small schools, each one following their own derech, and then have a way of all the schools coming together in terms of creating that communal perspective. But the fact is, because you're only following your own derech, this is an aspect of your own individuality. Because there's a place for you as an individual, and when you look at what you develop in terms of collective, the one thing also in terms of this model is the fact that the collective is not a communist collective. It's not everyone dressed the exact same way. It's a fact that it's a collective of individuals, which is a much stronger collective. But the fact is I'm trying to develop this idea, and with this, I'm trying to develop the idea that therefore our emotions have a role in it, right? The fact that I feel something for my family goes in line with the Torah perspective that my first responsibility is to my family. I'm not constantly challenging my family, my emotions. My emotions may indicate something that is significant. I have feelings for my family above other people because that indicates to me that I have a certain sense of connection with them and higher priority towards them. And they're my first group. If you think in terms of concentric circles, right? Then they're the first group that I'm connecting with. So therefore, when I'm presenting, it works with emotions. There's also and there is also the emotions of caring, right? It doesn't mean that everything is the other and is a fight. Like from a charitable perspective, like in the Christian concept, it's very much like I care for the other, and there's nothing in it for me whatsoever. And the fact that I'm total mivatel myself, I total get rid of myself. That's the great thing, right? No, there's an idea that Kosh Baruch Hu gave you these feelings, and they gave you these feelings for a reason, and you're supposed to develop that way, and you're supposed to flow that way. Therefore, there's concepts of having feelings and developing life. Therefore, in our life, they're not contrary to human nature in a certain level. People do get married, right? So and that was the point of I think of the model of Ramosha that way. He was a human being. He had emotion like a human being, and he brought it through in Torah, and he felt that Torah was a way of highlighting and fully developing a human being into the ideal, which really involves a balance of all the human emotions in terms of caring, being a nice guy, and also all the places that we have feelings for, we have to balance them together. Anyway, so that's important. So along this idea, there's obviously, if you look at it this way, and therefore those things which we need in life have value and have a reason for value. Because if we have a responsibility to ourselves and to others, and we have a vision of where we want to go and working towards something, then all our attributes are necessary to develop. So we have to have kochos. And I spoke last week about the idea of ani kamei stami. A person who's poor is like he's dead because he's missing the power that can come with money. Because money enables a person to act. Money is not just about pleasure principle. Money enables me to have what I need to be a better person, and in terms of that better person, it can even be like, for example, I want to sit and learn, and I find that if I have a nice room with a nice library that enhances my learning, well, the money will enable you to have a nice place to learn. So the fact is things of that nature. The idea of the Keli Van Vehu, this is my God, and I want to beautify him. There's a value that if I have a nice Kiddush cup and things like that, this will enhance my avodas Hashem. But it enhances because I'm into beauty, because I'm tied. It's also a connection of the human perspective and understanding beauty and things of that nature. You see, there's an interesting Yerushalmi. There's a Yerushalmi that says that there's a din v'cheshbon that we have to give. And Yerushalmi says one of the first questions that God's going to ask us when we have judgment after 120 is, did you forsake any pleasure? Right? And on the surface, it sounds like a hedonistic thing, right? Did you have, did you have all the pleasure? Did you ever give up any pleasure? So there's, what does that mean? Is that hedonism and so forth? So there's different approaches what is meant by that. I think I may have told you guys the story of Alps, right? The idea of that from the pleasures that we get in the world, we can have appreciation for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hey, we see the beautiful Swiss Alps. The story of Hashem Shafal Hirsch. He went to the Alps one day. It was very important for him to go to Alps. He said, they asked him, why did you do it? He says, I've been living here for a long time, I'm really concerned. I thought I'd better go see the Alps and see the splendor of the Alps, right? Because when I stand before Kodesh Baruch Hu, he's going to ask me, so what did you think of my Alps? I'm sitting there and say, I didn't see them. The Alps, I created the Alps, and you couldn't, enjoy the splendor and feel the splendor of my creation of the Alps. At the end, the fact is from our experiences we can actually feel certain benefit, the human feeling of that. And the fact is, you go certain places, and it can lead us to say to have even an awesomeness towards the Kodesh Baruch Hu. You go somewhere. I remember I saw the rock. It's very majestic. It's something that touches. That's one answer. The Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Sata, has a different understanding of the Rishalmi. He actually explains this in the Shem. This is the way he explains the Rishalmi. He basically says what the Rishalmi is saying is, did you ever give up a pleasure that you needed? We as human beings need things, right? Some people, different things that we need, and so forth and so forth, to be able to basically live our lives in a way that allows us to focus on what we really need to focus on. So, for example, if you're into I'm going to fast every day because I want to feel the pain and the fasting and so forth and so forth, and therefore you never sit and learn, right? Because Baruch is going to say, did you eat? Well, no, I didn't have never any learning because I always had headaches. Well, did you eat? No, because I was fasting. Piety, I was fasting.
Well, isn't this the idea of one who gives up? You bring a chatas offering?
Right. That's one viewpoint on the Nazir. That it's a viewpoint that there's not enough to be us. You have to make new prohibitions. That's why there's an argument. That's one viewpoint of why a Nazir has to bring a chatas. But the point is that the pleasures that you need in order to be a functioning human being, in order to think in terms of the goals, those are significant. And that's why taking care of yourself has a value, because you have responsibilities. Therefore, you have to have the ability to have those responsibilities. You got to take care of yourself. You can't constantly attack yourself. Anyway, so that's I think a very important aspect as we develop this idea that in terms of giving tzedakah and things of that nature, there's a vision that goes with it. There's a balance involved with it, so forth and so forth, and it really involves the mind, and that's what's so significant here. It involves the mind. What I'm arguing for is not something that says, "Oh, this is an argument a person used to keep money and not give tzedakah." Can a person use that argument? Possibly. But I need this for this. I can't do this. But wait a second. This is something that's significant. I have to understand. A person comes to me and says, let's say, I'm doing I need to buy a dira in Yerushalayim for my child who's getting married. Right? It's very nice. But he needs to be in Yerushalayim. So there's one aspect saying why he needs to be in Yerushalayim because he was born there. Okay, that's legitimate. But the fact is if I'm giving up a certain level of the comfort that I need to do my avoda, right? I'm sorry, I have to do a cheshbon, right? Is that more important than the responsibilities I have to myself? Now, in terms of all this, that's why it really becomes that the whole process is one of chachma. It's not just an aspect of the emotions. Most people talk in terms of stuff to give, and you should have you should want to give, and it's all a matter of the emotion of caring. The point is that it's actually an emotion that involves your mind. And so now let me try and explain something. There's a balance here, okay? And that's why a lot of times. I'm not saying that you have to be careful if you're a person who is, let's say, tough with his employees, really tough with his employees, lives in a mansion and with employees, he's arguing over every 2 cents with his employees. Wait a second, is that really a way that a person deals with his employees? Shouldn't you be makir tov? Shouldn't you recognize that your wealth has come through this person's actions? See, the fact is that this recognition of ideas, it's not just a matter of just going through motions. The idea of understanding the different balances and emotions. The person who owns a business maybe is entitled to have, capitalism is entitled to have more money than his employees. But on the other hand, the person who understands that his employees are important and the well functioning of the employees are important, right? This is what the big car companies found out, that it was very important to make sure that the people on the assembly lines were somewhat happy. That's why they encouraged those people to have hobbies, and they gave them breaks during the day because they wouldn't become too habitual. Because the fact is we're human beings and they have to be taken care of. So the fact is that the big companies understood it was in their best interest to actually put more money into their employees and employees' standard of living and the employees' quality of life. These are all
it would appear
balances.
so, but in the bigger argument, it would seem that it became less competitive in those conditions.
Yeah, that's true, because it became very big, but there's a lot of issues like that.
Yeah.
But the fact is these are all balances. But you have to think in terms of a person as a human being. There's certain things where that's why in Torah there's so much Torah law about contractual obligations and responsibility to workers and stuff like that. So much of the model we have for business. The truth is, it's not just a matter of our caring. It's also an aspect of business, in the sense that business is transactions, right? We have to work together to a common goal, And the point is that when I see that, I understand that I have to take care of my customers and stuff like that. It changes the mindset, like
Moshe's argument to Paro. Moshe's argument to Paro. Give them a day off.
Right.
They'll work harder for you.
Right. Down the line, that was okay. The fact is that you see, there's an interesting the thing that hits me about much of this is that it changes your perspective on everything. Like, I always get a kick out of people, and there's always stories about the person who's a big bulk stalker, right? Gets his, he has he's honored by these people and honored that people because he lives stuck in, and he gets he has a dinner in his honor and so forth and so forth. Then you find out from his employees he's the hardest negotiator, and I'm not saying you really, but the fact is that he's just not he's not in the transactional idea of the sense that I have an obligation to you, you have an obligation to me. It's transactional, right? He's very tough. Right? So when it's a matter of him just giving, he's magnanimous. But the fact is, when it comes down to really working out things as a what I would think corporate entity, he loses sight of the actual transactions, and he's always figuring out ways of putting off how he plays his employees and doing this and doing that, because consciousness that it's not me against the other. Because when it's him and another, when it's a matter of chesed, oh yeah, I'm giving to the other. But it's a matter of me and the other in the perception of actually being a transaction, it's like the adversarial system, which is really problematic. I think the adversarial system is a real problematic theory, which is the system of law. It's really problematic. In Torah, it's not the adversarial system. You really see this in terms of transactions. It's very interesting that Jewish business ethics, one of the focus of Jewish business ethics is that you have to be concerned also about the person on the other side. Yes, you're in a business transaction. Obviously, you have to be concerned. You want to get the best price and so forth and so forth and so forth. But on the other hand, you also have to recognize the other person's rights. That's why there's so many stories about a person who goes to the other side and says, "Listen, that wasn't our agreement." So, I found this extra diamond in the thing here. Obviously, you didn't intend for it to be in this basket or whatever. So I have to go back to that. It wasn't part of the transaction. The point is that it's much more in your mind. That's what I'm really trying to get at. It's in your mind of understanding, and this works together when you think in terms of the collective. We're all in it together. It's in my best interest that you're doing well also. It's like a teamwork, Anyways, but one of the things, and this is where I want to finish tonight, is one of the big differences the fact that in Judaism we focus on toelos, on accomplishment. This is an idea that's expressed by Rabbi Dr. Walter Wurzburger. He makes a distinction between Jewish concepts of ethics and Christian concepts of ethics. He sort of basically says in Christianity the focus is on the doer, the feelings of the person doing the giving, right? The person who's doing the action. It's important that that person feels charitable. Okay, it's like the recent thing in Haiti, right? You see some people, you go, oh, it's important that you feel bad about the Haitians. It's important that you develop this emotion and caring and so forth and so forth. The focus is on the giver. Okay, and in that regard, that's where you get the line. It's better to give than to receive. You want to focus, you should want to give, and everything like that. But it's very much focused on the person and the emotions of the person giving. That's what he says is a focus of Christian ethics. Not that we're not supposed to have those emotions. There's an Indian of giving b'sever panim yafis in a happy way and so forth, in a friendly way and so forth and so forth. But the focus in Jewish ethics is to Ellis. It's the accomplishment. I say that's why the Israelis were there. I'm not saying they're halachic, but I'm saying they came out of the Jewish consciousness. What's our job? We got to go help the Haitians. Let's get over there right away. It doesn't matter whether you're feeling this or feeling that. The first thing is get there and save lives, right? You know what I mean? So the fact is, from a Jewish perspective, and this is what Rabbi Wurzburger argues, is that it's very much to Ellis, accomplishment oriented. Not totally, right? But the fact is that that's a focus. I give my money. I want to accomplish something, right? The key is not how I'm feeling and I feel it's terrible. I feel so bad for you. It's nice, but what's going to come out of this? My focus isn't on the development of the emotion in you and these feelings in you, right? Development is that, because what happens is if that's your focus, you really don't have a focus to get out of this situation, because you always need the person who is in need, so you can always feel charitable, right? You always have the person who's feeling charitable, so like that, right? In our idea, like our response is, let's get rid of this need, let's get rid of it, and there's no need, it's fine. I can move on to there. It's an important aspect. Now, as long as there's need, it's the idea of doing it in a correct way, in a friendly way, and so forth and so forth. But the fact is, what's the objective? Anyways, this sort of lays the foundations that get really into what I want to talk about, which is how we start looking at different perspectives. So it really changes the idea. Like, look in terms of shuls, right? As an example, right? You need, the shul has a whole issue in terms of funding and what's necessary, but bottom line is if you're a member of a kehillah, you live in a community, you need a place to daven in a minyan. So you're not doing, it's not like you're helping out, like you're giving. You're making it a mitzvah consumption. Like you have to buy a kiddush cup to make kiddush. Well, you have to buy a place to have a minyan. So that's your responsibility. Oh, so one guy wants to have oak panels in the shul. The other guy says, I don't care about oak panels. Oh, so now we can start talking. What's really necessary and so forth and so forth. Then you get into issues like, well, this guy over there, he's a very wealthy guy, so he wants oak panels. He wants his shul to have oak panels. This guy over here doesn't have any money. Oh, so now we're talking about the shul. Everyone agrees it's shul. But the question is, should we have oak panels or not? Oh, the guys who are wealthy want oak panels. So how much do you balance responsibilities to the people who can't afford them? But the point is that you're understanding that it's a little bit different because you're making the purchase. It's not like you're giving tzedakah for the oak panels. It's you're deciding that you want to. It's like I want to buy a sterling silver kiddush cup because I can afford it. Oh, so this is the way you want to do the mitzvah. Now, the community needs to have a place to daven. You want to have it that it should have oak panels because it's your place to daven as well. Okay? But other people can't afford it. So if you are going to have oak panels, right, when you're purchasing, you're not just doing, giving, charitable donations and things. You're basically saying, hey, this is part of my mitzvah consumption, the same way I'd like to buy a sterling silver Kiddush cup. Oh, but there's something else here. The community will also benefit from it. Oh, so there is an aspect of me helping out the community. Because the point is that I am allowing everyone to daven with oak panels. It's worthwhile. So then someone who says, something, but I'm still benefiting from oak panels because it makes my davening more enhancing. So maybe I should still want to contribute to oak panels because I want to have, because it's also I'm benefiting from my mitzvah consumption. Do you understand how it's?
But if the community as a whole decides we have to have oak panels,
then everyone,
right?
then community has to cover it.
Then the person who gives beyond his share.
Actually,
at that point, is that tzedakah?
Well, the question is, that's interesting, but the question is what's his share? The question is, we'll see. We'll talk about then working out the share, and then why. And the person who wants.
You're saying his share is dependent on his wealth.
It might be dependent on his wealth, it might be dependent on his usage, and other things like that. Okay, but the point is that if a person gives more, right? The question is that okay? So who's actually benefiting from it? If the person's giving more, so that other members of the community can give less, well, that we're going to see that there's a technical definition of tzedakah, which is helping out poor people. Maybe you're not helping out poor people, but maybe you're doing a chesed by saying, listen, like if you middle class, nice middle class people, and you want to buy someone you're wealthy, you want to buy someone a sterling silver Kiddush cup, right? Can't afford it, but you want to buy him sterling silver Kiddush cup, or you sit there and say, listen, I got you a deal on the sterling silver Kiddush cup, and he got one less price because you actually covered a little bit of it, right? The point is that tzedakah, or is that a present? Is a present such a bad thing? It's different mindsets of knowing what we're doing, right? Yes, it's true though, if a person who just can't afford, let's say, education, right, Jewish education, and you're paying for the Jewish education, and the person's poor, otherwise he won't get it, then that's tzedakah, right? But the fact is that the reason I get involved in the technical definition of knowing what you're doing is because I want to get it into your mind. I want to get the whole perspective of what you're doing with your funds and so forth. It's not to try and figure out a way, well, it sounds like, oh, well, you've just justified why I can hold on to my money. No. It's a matter of understanding your objectives in a much broader sense, of understanding it technically and what you are really doing with your funds and the decisions you're making, and that the responsibilities that go with that decisions, and so forth.
I guess the obvious question that comes from this is that what is not what is giving, but what is tzedakah.
Yeah, that's what we're going to get into, because tzedakah I would say there's a generic tzedakah, and then which is the way everyone uses tzedakah, and then there's a much more technical tzedakah definition. The technical definition of tzedakah is what you give to poor people, and that's specifically poor people. There's a poverty definition. It's giving to people below that poverty line.
And you can give it to institutions to give to those people? Or?
That's an interesting question. The point is, yeah, you give it through institutions, but the question is that it's interesting. My son actually asked me this question today. If you give to an institution, and then he was asking me, when is it that you actually fill the mitzvah tzedakah? When the institution gives it to someone, or when you give it to the institution? Well, the truth is, the institution is just you're making the institution your shliach. Then he asked me this was his real question.
But it strikes me the question: if you give $100 to an institution,
mm-hmm.
so you think that gives to poor people, so you figure I've given $100 to tzedakah.
Yeah.
But it turns out that you've given, let's say conservatively, very often it's quite different, but let's say there has to be some cost of administration.
Right.
Even if it's very low, $10.
And the fact is...
Those $10 didn't go to poor people.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean it's not something you shouldn't give to. The point is that administration...
I didn't say that. I said, but in your own calculation, do you have to say to yourself, I give $10 to a salary and $90 to poor people?
In your own mind, that will be to understand how you're spending your money. That'll be understand how your money's working. Now, it might still be the best use of money. You might say, hey, listen, I got $100 here. I can give it to a homeless person on the street, $100 perfectly, or I can take the $100 and give it to this organization that takes care of poor people, even though only $75 of that money will actually go to poor people, the other $25 in terms of administration. It might still be that giving $100 to that organization is still more worthwhile, because it creates an infrastructure and helps out things and gets things going. They've raised funds and stuff and stuff. But at least you understand what's really going on. Now, what you might be thinking about, what about Meiser? The concept of giving a tenth. Well, that's a different question. Okay, because the truth is the whole issue of what is our obligation for Meiser and stuff like that.
Correct.
But that's something that's part of the consideration. But it's much more. It's much more extensive in terms of at least understanding what you're doing.
Correct.
See, I find that, for example, a lot of people, they think, oh, yeah, I just want to give my money that goes directly to poor. I'm giving my money, but all of it has to go to the poor person. What happens is organizations which could really develop the place much better and are suffering. Because no one says, I'm giving money to develop the infrastructure. Well, guess what? That infrastructure would get more things done. If you start using your mind and understand the collective, but that's just aspect of using your mind. But also, if you understand the whole collective, that when you're working towards organizations, you're thinking in terms of seeing a broader perspective of what you're doing. You're developing things. You're developing an arm of the community that is concerned about people who are more difficult.
But that's not tzedakah.
That's not technical tzedakah, but it would be the generic tzedakah. See, I once asked a question about, like for example, when you make a neder tzedakah, it says, you say, because the person gave tzedakah. That does not mean, the way we use the term tzedakah does not mean technical tzedakah. That means giving money.